Welcome everybody to the Majestic Musings podcast, the Skeptrack edition. I am Tombstone the Deadman,
I am Greydon Square.
and we're here today to talk to you about Majestic Comics.
So, before we get started, I'm sure there are people here who've already heard about me and heard about Tombstone and know about Grand Unified. But just in case there are people here who are not familiar with us and what we do and what we've been, I'm just going to give you guys a pretty brief synopsis about who we are and what we've done up until this point and where we're going. So, I've been a musician, an atheist rapper for as long as I've been a professional musician, and you know, it was my identity for a long time. I made music from a secular atheist perspective through the black experience. And what am I hearing? Look, these big ass ears ain't gonna miss nothing. Like, if you playing something in the background, I'm gonna hear it. But you know, I've been a musician my whole life, but I got into hip hop at a later age, and of course, my experience and the way that I thought about things bled into my music. So, of course, you know, coming out being one of the few, if not other than Tombstone, only black atheist rappers, for me it was necessary to kind of put my stamp on that particular genre and kind of bring some identity and awareness to it. Fast forward a couple years, I came out in 2007. Tombstone had already been out. He had already been making music. He'd already had a fan base. He'd already
Old man Tombstone.
Yeah. He'd already been doing his thing. And so we had actually met because there were people trying to pit us against each other.
Yeah.
So there were people trying to be like, oh, yeah, Gray, you're whack. I know this dude who's really dope. He's Tombstone. And I was like, okay, that's cool. But then there would be people trying to do the same thing to him.
Yeah.
They'd be like, oh, yeah, you're whack, dog. But I know this dude is Greydon Square. So I reached out to him. I think we first connected on Reddit, right?
No, it was on YouTube. I had just released the song. The Atheist Experience had played Poison. As the
that was when people were getting at me, yeah.
Right. And you went on my YouTube wall and congratulated me and said it's a dope song. And instead of coming with some nonsense that I guess they wanted to see us butt heads, he came with an extended hand. Right.
But I saw the advantage in unifying forces, right? Like my ego's not big enough for me to believe I can do anything alone. I always believed in this idea of, you know, being a team player and being a part of a brand.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, continue.
But I do feel like I had the vision of what ended up becoming Grand Unified. So I approached Tombstone and I was like, listen, you got your fans, I got my fans, and we had a couple other people who were involved in this, but why don't we bring everybody together? Why don't we bring your community and my community together? And that was the beginning of Grand Unified Theory. And so now we're, you know, couple thousand people strong in the world as far as within our community itself, and on our Discord we're over 1,000. On one Discord we're over 1,000. On another we got like 200 people, and we got different orgs and different groups and stuff. Different communities spawn out of Grand Unified. Yeah. So for us it was really important to create something that people can identify with that wasn't religiously based. And so we were going through this entire period recording music, talking about, you know, the religious experience and our atheistic perspective on that, till we got to a point where we wanted to branch out and do some other stuff that was creative. Yeah. Now, you can go ahead and I'm going to lead you into this, but Tombstone is actually the comic book expert, geek, whatever you want to call it. I'm a Trekkie and I'll die on that hill, but I wasn't really a comic book fan like that. I didn't grow up reading Marvel, DC, none of that stuff. I mean, the closest you probably get was like I was into like Power Rangers or some shit, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like or Captain Planet or something like that. But for the most part, I wasn't into comics. I was much more into space operas, and so Battlestar, Stargate, Star Trek, Farscape, all those, anything with star in it, I was into it.
That star on it.
Right. So, but he was telling me like, yo, you should go, you know, check out. I think it was the Marvel database.
Comics database, and I told him because I tried to explain very poorly. Their causology, like where everything came from there, and I was screwing it up. So I sent him to the Marvel Comics database, and then I didn't see him anymore. Like for days.
It was a week. It was probably a good week.
I'm trying to contact him, nothing. And then he finally approaches me and says, So Stan Lee and a handful of other writers basically immortalized themselves by writing versions of themselves into a fictional universe. I was like, pretty much, yeah. He was like, why can't we do that?
And that question was the beginning of Majestic Comics. That question was the beginning of Extropy and Entropy. We had started this concept once before where we had tried to create a very convoluted, complex storyline of a bunch of things going on, and we kind of failed in doing that.
No, stop. We didn't kind of fail.
Oh, no, we
failed.
Yeah, we failed. It was, but we also come from a space of, I'm a lyric writer. I'm not a story writer. So I had to relearn how to use certain creative muscles in order to
It's different.
create the conditions that would allow me to even write fiction like that. So, I mean, after getting lost in the Marvel database, I came back and I was like, listen, if Stan Lee can immortalize himself in his own universe, why can't we? And it started to force the question of, am I the author or the author? Because you start getting into some of these higher ontological questions that I really feel like being an atheist helped me unpack, which is, what is the nature and the value of a prime mover, right? What is the purpose of a creator? Why is it necessary? And one of the things that I always come back to was that when we started creating our characters, there's a certain energy that we have. We call it quintessence, but I'm sure people call it a bunch of different other stuff. But there's a creative energy that exists. And we, quote unquote, channel that creative energy. We do it when we write music. We do it when we write stories. So we tried to recreate the conditions so that we could channel that creativity to actually write fiction. So that the second time around, we wouldn't fall on our faces like that. So we actually were able to scale all the way back, really, right?
And all the way back to just two characters.
Two characters.
Because previously, I could have swore we had at least 200 characters with maybe a scant basic synopsis of each one, and we were trying to fit it all into a story and make it make sense, and it was garbage. So we scaled everything back to two characters, and we built the universe around those two characters. And in the process of doing that, we wind up building thousands of years of history for each one of their civilizations, and it got really, really geeky. So I liked it.
So I'm going to back up just a little bit because I'm sure some people here have heard of my music, but me and Tombstone make a lot of music together, right? And when we started making music together and we started talking about comics together, the natural question came up, would you guys consider making music from a comic book perspective?
Yeah.
And so, of course, me wanting to always challenge myself, and I know you always want to challenge yourself, lyrically, I always look for the hardest hill to climb. It's like, well, I'm serious, I really do. And I felt like rapping from the perspective of the characters would be the hardest hill to climb.
Yeah.
But I do want to play you guys something that we've already done together so you can kind of see how our styles even mesh. So then when I play you guys the comic book related stuff, you guys can understand where that's coming from. So can I play that for you guys? All right, cool. So I'm going to play this song called Broken Symmetry. It was from an album I did called Omniverse, Type 3 Omniverse. And here it is. Hopefully we get some good sound. Oh, wait a minute. We got some other music going on. All right.
This is just like our podcast.
Yeah, so it should be playing, but I don't hear anything. There we go. Why am
I don't know. Let me take a look. What you doing?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I see why. You're on your. That's no, that's cool. There you go.
No, but there's something else playing when he turns it up. I hear 2013 8 District.
I do too. That's another song we did.
Okay. So it was playing on a background video. I'm not sure how it came up, but we're going to get this right. There we go.
That's it.
Sorry, guys.
Check. You think this universe is special, don't you? The Boolean rhymes I kick reflects the light like a mess of opals. Check the vocals, their makeup is of data. You listen and instantly want to take up for your savior. But this isn't even about that. It's about escaping and never increasing mousetrap. Two states with fate undetermined, yet they both exist without a stake in the current. Maybe the present is a lesson in paradox. I'll peek into the future just to see if it's there or not. Study existics with a splifflet, lyrical whiz kid misfit with a literal sixth sense. Get bent for trying to break my symmetry. You couldn't defeat one if there were 10 of me. Even if you had a century to prepare, you'd still be looking up for a god like it's meant to be there. Broken symmetry, voice decode with road telemetry. Continue to go with the flow of entropy though. Yeah, it's different, the threat to uniformity. Existence was better when it was orderly. Broken symmetry, voice decode with road telemetry. Continue to go with the flow of entropy though. Yeah, it's different, the threat to uniformity. Existence was better when it was orderly. Blaze the freshest, the space we stay in is asymmetric. Explore the decay with ancient methods. I came to wreck it, force feeding you physics within it. I wanna go far beyond entropy limits. Overload your sensory inputs. Throw bars a ridiculous distance from the pillars of wisdom. A long tradition of strong predictive. Songs of interest where only the facts belong in sentence. Symmetrically appealing though, I'll wreck it with this feeling from the get-go to the ceiling with flows so precarious and arrogant, lifted with the areas but condemned cause I spit about invariance. Test me and compete, you and your chief can both lay with the dead deities at my feet. We're just the finite seeking infinite life as we soar through space at a percentage of light. Broken symmetry, voice decode with road telemetry. Continue to go with the flow of entropy.
I don't listen to my own music often, so I'm actually vibing to this shit.
Better when it was orderly. Broken symmetry, voice decode with road telemetry. Continue to go with the flow of entropy though. Yeah, it's different, the threat to uniformity. Existence was better when it was orderly. Stone.
The only thing that's permanent is the state of impermanence. So many aren't aware of this and think that they can swerve from it. The nerve of them, the utter hubris is kinda humorous. The stupid does the exact opposite of the studious. Less of biological units, nothing but specs to me of momentary interest and gets stored in a directory. Their entire species history makes up a fragment of my memory. I've forgotten more than they will ever be. They think so linear, our thoughts are never similar. The things they think are massive are to me a small perimeter. So everything around them eventually has to pass away. Their closed system slowly succumbing to forces of decay. Universal deconstruction leads to everything's destruction. Thoughts of stopping the cycle will only start to be corrupted. To me it means nothing, I'm jumping from this universe, returning to the void and on the hunt for something new to search.
That's second
Broken
guy,
symmetry, voice decode with road telemetry. Continue to go with the flow of entropy though. Yeah,
So-
it's different, the threat to uniformity.
Basically, we had been making music for a while. That's just one of the songs that we had did together. And if you notice in that song, we obviously have different styles, but the thing that's distinct about how we operate is that I always try to come from a very hyper-intellectual perspective, right? And my music has a very extropian tint to it. We'll get into what extropianism is in a second, but the idea of technological progression and the idea of thought provocation and asking deep questions is always something that I've tried to do in my music. Right. And Tombstone style is a very social entropy, bully, aggressive style. Yeah. And it has a very much more cynical tint to it than mine that has a little bit more of a technological optimism, right? Because I still subscribe to the idea that the singularity is something that could happen and all these different things.
We'll never make it.
Yeah, no, we'll never make it. But the reason why I bring that up is because it lent to our styles.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when we started creating our actual characters, we took from our rap styles and our personality styles,
Right.
and we put that into our characters.
Right.
So the characters, we'll get into introducing the characters, but do you want to speak on the music?
The music of E&E? Or
just the music that we've done so far before I move on.
So initially when we started, because the story was different, the story continued to evolve. Some of the music we did early on, if you were to listen to it now after reading like the first issue, you would instantly realize we had changed all of that stuff up. But the music was still good, it just wasn't relevant anymore to how we developed the story in the long run. So we had to go back to the drawing board and recreate some more songs that had something more to do with how the characters were now and not how we initially had. Because initially, there was no nuance between the two characters. Both of them were basically a destructive force trying to destroy everything. But over the course of time and us developing like just a better way to write and create characters. We did build the nuance in where Gray of Extropia is a lot more closer to Gray the person,
Right.
and Lord Entropy is a lot more closer to Tombstone. And I think it comes off good. It's a great contrast.
Absolutely. So then it goes in, then we go into the question of like us being atheists and us kind of representing from that perspective for a long time. How does that coincide into telling creative stories, right? How does that coincide to creating engaging storylines that people are compelled by? And watching a lot of science fiction growing up, I know you've read a lot of comics, like cosmic level comics and stuff like that. I've always been fascinated with the larger questions. It's probably why I gravitated towards the question of is there a God or not to begin with, because I'm fascinated by large questions. So some of the larger questions that I have struggled with end up in this story, end up in the makeup of this reality, because I've always wanted to understand a little bit more about the way that existence works, and if I had some sort of effect on that through my creativity. So I think with Majestic Comics, and you can speak to this a little bit more, our goal as a company is the same as our goal as musicians.
Right.
Just to make you think. In our story, there aren't really heroes and villains. If you're a pro wrestling fan, you'll understand this term, but there are heels and faces.
Right.
And people can turn at any moment, right? His character started off as a heel character.
Right.
But slowly had a face turn because of the necessity of the politics in the story, right? The circumstances in the story forced a face turn.
Right.
That doesn't mean he can't pull a heel move.
Oh, he will.
That doesn't mean that the character Gray of Extropia, who is normally a babyface type character, maybe can turn heel and maybe take an action where you're like, wow, that action really shocked me. I've always felt like this. If you label a character a hero, it can't really shock you. And if you label a character a villain, it can't really shock you.
Right.
It'll do things crazy. Well, he's a villain. He's supposed to do it. He's supposed to kill millions of people,
He gets expected and he gets put inside of a box.
Yeah. So we tried to write around that. We tried to, even our main antagonist in the story
isn't really a villain.
Yeah, he's not a villain.
Once you get to know what his motivations are and what he's trying to do. The other thing about fiction and how it works its way into atheism and all of that. So I've heard actually someone that came up here a little earlier said the same thing about how people take their belief systems and they intertwine it with their self-identity. So that if you are merely attacking the position, they get defensive because now it's so much a part of them, they feel like you're attacking them.
Their identity.
With fiction, it's like a whole environment where we can have these conversations where no one's the target. These are just the characters talking to each other and not the other person that you ordinarily would have had a conversation about Jesus with. He would have disagreed and got mad and thought that you were attacking them. We can have those conversations in the book without having the reflexive defensiveness people get. And if the characters are written well enough, if the story is written good, they get into the story and they're willing to listen to the other side. Because during the course of reading the story, they're going to hear, of course, something they agree with and something they don't agree with. But because they don't personalize it, they'll actually receive it. At least that's the theory.
Right.
So that's why I think fiction, using that as a presentation for a lot of these arguments and positions that people take on the nature of reality and whether or not gods exist, fiction is a good way for that. And I've also noticed, so in the atheist, secular, skeptic, activist community, it's always been kind of a thing about how do you present this information? How do you present these arguments? What's the most effective way to get people to listen to you? Now, I'm not going to sit up here and say that it's comic books, but I'm saying it's comic books.
Absolutely. Great point. Well said. So I want to lead into a video where we did a Kickstarter campaign to basically fund our issue 0, our pilot issue, called The Fulcrum Point. And first, I got to just give a shout out to the Grand Unified community. It's really a testament to them that we're able to do stuff like this because, you know, we made a decision a long time ago that we were going to step out on our own and try to do our own thing and create our own community. And at the end of the day, they were the reason why we not only got funded, but we got off the ground. We didn't have to start from zero. He says it all the time, like, we never had to start from zero. because we already had a fan base and already had people who were interested in our work. So we're appreciative, and we feel like we have an obligation to those fans who supported this and supported our music to not let them down. So this is the Kickstarter launch video. We've already ended the Kickstarter, so if it says like you can donate or pledge,
you don't have to.
We don't have to or anything like that. But this is the video that we put together for that.
Years ago, Tombstone the 10 years ago, Tombstone the Deadman and I met through a mutual interest of hip hop, science, and skepticism. Quickly moving from creative colleagues to best friends, our conversations would take on these deep philosophical tones, which would cover gods, time, even existence itself. Many of our conversations revolved around fiction and the validity of the stories that they produced. Tombstone being a massive comic book nerd and me being a huge sci-fi junkie, we quickly warmed to the idea of trying to tell a story that would attempt to answer this question. There were plenty of ideas, plenty of stories, but little form. What we needed was structure. Enter Joseph Arnold, an extremely talented, highly passionate graphic artist who we met through the music that we were making. With one so talented, able to now depict our story, we were finally ready to tell it. This was the birth of Majestic Comics.
Imagine Game of Thrones with a sci-fi aesthetic and just a hint of the superhero genre, crafted all together in an ongoing tale that, at its core, asks one specific question. Are all realities both true and false? In the inaugural issue of our comic book series, Extropy and Entropy, The Fulcrum Point, we introduce you to two characters from different worlds, species, and cultures. Grey of Extropia, one of the greatest scientific minds in the history of his advanced civilization, and Lord Malik, ruler of a former predatory civilization with a blood-soaked history, the Entropic Empire. Now normally, these two would have nothing in common, but a crisis brought about by a mutual enemy forged an alliance of convenience between their two nations, and this, over time, created an unlikely friendship between Grey of Extropia and Lord Entropy. A friendship and alliance that now seems in peril because of the creation of a forbidden technology that destabilizes the political ecosystem in the entire galaxy. And finally, the reason for this campaign is that we need your help in funding the printing of the physical copies of issue number 0. This is a
I'll save you guys that part. Of course, the shot of you holding up the comic book is always great because I feel like you're such a kid when you hold up your own comic book. You know, it's
53-year-old toddler.
Look at his face. Look at his face. Listen, every time like we open this book, his face does that.
That's not true.
It does. Watch. See? He doesn't even want to look. He doesn't even want to look. I'm telling you, when he gets around this type of creativity, especially when he's involved with it, I understand because I get that same feeling. I feel like a kid in a candy store too. But we tried to create something really engaging, and I'm glad that Tombstone put that video together himself. I mean,
yeah, I do.
Extremely talented at video editing and stuff like that. And we needed all different forms of promotional media to help this get off the ground. As you see, we got stop motion animation, and we started working on an audio book version of this and everything. So if you guys are any voice actors out there, let me know.
Yeah.
But basically our goal was to get this off the ground, and that was the video that we used for that. So I do want to move more into characters and lore. We have a couple of videos about that. There's 3 characters we'll cover in the beginning. If you look at our main cover, there's kind of 3 centerpieces that are there. It's Grey, Malik, and then a female character named Zilith that is an integral part of our story as well. So we'll do those 3 character bios, and then we'll kind of wrap everything up about how you guys can contact us, and if you want to get involved, let us know. We'll start with Lord Entropy. He's the boss.
All me.
Greetings, Majestic Ones. I am Tombstone the Deadman, and I'm back again with another Majestic moment. So in this episode, I want to talk to you guys about one of the two major characters in our story, the undisputed, unchallenged, absolute monarch of the Entropic Empire, Lord Entropy, also known as Malik, son of Memnon. Now, as a child, Malik was educated in all forms of combat, military tactics, political science, and diplomacy. Unfortunately, though, for much of the Entropic history, diplomacy begins and ends with comply or die. Now, raised up under that system, Malik's rule wasn't that much different from that of his fathers or the other leaders that came before them. Fortunately, though, Malik got to experience certain things that his father and those other leaders never did, and it kind of helped with his character progression. But I'll let you guys find out about that from reading the comic books. Now, as a member of the Entropic race, Malik possesses vast superhuman strength and durability. His body also metabolizes something known as entropic force energy. This gives him the ability to cause inorganic and organic matter to decay. Now, the average member of the Entropic race can also manipulate this energy as well, and they can use it to boost their physical attacks as well as the destructive attacks of any weapons they're using. But because Malik is of the royal bloodline, he can manipulate this energy to a much greater degree. Malik also wields a cosmic war mallet by the name of Doom, and is also sometimes referred to as the instrument of disorder. He also wears a suit of celestial armor that increases his already vast superhuman strength and resistance to harm. But a more detailed description of those things will have to wait for another episode. We'd like to thank all of our Patreon supporters for all of your support. We simply could not do this without you.
Oh yeah.
That's the other thing. So one of the things I was afraid of when we first started the company is there's a lot of legal crap that you have to do when you're trying to protect your IP. And I don't have to tell you guys how expensive that is.
Oh yeah.
If it had not been for our Patreon supporters and how they just rallied to help us, none of this would have got off the ground, because I would have been too afraid that someone would steal our stuff and we would have no recourse. And in the era of the NFT,
Yeah, seriously.
you know,
That NFT, well, I'm not even gonna get into that, but
yeah.
our music got jacked by an NFT
got
pirate,
jacked,
so
yes,
it's like,
yes.
I feel salty about that, but we'll go on to video number 2. I won't talk about that.
Majestic Ones, I am Tombstone the Deadman, and I'm back again with another Majestic moment. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the other primary character in our Extropy and Entropy story, the brilliantly inventive scholar, scientific genius, Grey of Extropia. Now, to understand Grey, you first have to understand who the Extropian people are. The Extropians are a naturally inquisitive race who evolved up out of their primitive beginnings, pushed through their trials and tribulations that once almost brought their civilization to the brink of destruction, and transformed into an extremely advanced, peaceful galactic coalition that spans many star systems. Extropian culture is centered around scientific inquiry, technological achievement, and progress. And because of this, they are responsible for many of the ubiquitous technologies that are used by other civilizations in that region. Born Iowa Grey, by the time he is introduced to all of you in the Fulcrum Point comic book, he is already one of the most accomplished scientists in the Extropian civilization. Obsessive thinker and tinkerer, Grey grew up idolizing one of the greatest Extropian scientists to have ever lived, Notaire Zagain. Hoping to emulate and even surpass Zagain's career, a young Grey went on to excel in several scientific disciplines. He became a master in mathematics, physics, biology, astronomy, computer hardware, software engineering, and several other fields.
Nerd.
By the time he reached advanced institutional training, he became one of the greatest up-and-coming minds in Extropian academia. As I'm sure you could imagine, a society this advanced would have found ways to augment their physiology. And in that, Grey is even further along than most of his contemporaries. He has replaced much of his body with a nanite cellular structure that grants him the ability to heal quickly and withstand damage at a rate that rivals even the most powerful of abstracts. These nanites communicate with his mind at the speed of thought and grant him enhanced reflexes, speed, and strength. But while he is capable of brute force, he typically uses his keen scientific mind and technology to overcome obstacles in his path and to aid him in his overall goals. His primary tool in doing this is called the Hyperstaff. It's a cylindrical nanite construction constructed supercomputer periphery. This gives him access to the sum total of vast extropian knowledge and wisdom that they have accumulated over thousands of years. It has a myriad of offensive and defensive capabilities too, but I think we'll cover that later in another episode. We like to thank.
We have way too much time on our hands. I'm sorry. Like, this is what happens when you work for yourself.
That's
like,
what my wife be saying, but I'll be ignoring it.
The final character that we're going to cover is Zillith, and then we'll go into somewhat of our closing Q&A session.
Ambitious Empress Chief, Queen of AI, Deadman, and I'm back again with another majestic moment. In this week's episode, we will focus on another major character in the Extropy and Entropy story, the cunning, ruthless, fiercely ambitious Empress Chief, Queen of Aeons, Zillith. And like Malik and Gray, in order for you to get a feel for Zillith, you have to learn a little bit about the people and culture she comes from, the Aeonians. The Aeonians evolved from brutal cannibalistic...
Uh-oh.
What happened? Did we lose something? Yeah, it might be. See what we will do. We'll downscale a little bit. Maybe we get a... Oh,
realistic origins that left little margin for error or vulnerability. For them, life was...
Sorry.
And like Malik and Gray, in order for you to get a feel for Zillith, you have to learn a little bit about the people and culture she comes from, the Aeonians. The Aeonians evolved from brutal cannibalistic origins that left little margin for error or vulnerability. For them, life was harsh, and you were either hunter or prey. This binary form of survivalist reasoning informs much of Aeonian philosophy and perspective. Naturally duplicitous, they will often feign weakness or vulnerability in order to lure potential prey into elaborate schemes of violence and destruction. These core traits help forge their species into a formidable cosmic political machine, influencing abstract council politics to the highest levels. Aeonian tribal constructs are in the form of feudalistic clans with an overall caste system that has 4 levels. Being from a lower caste family and clan meant that you could expect to be excluded from ever attaining any sort of political or economic power. Not to mention the crushing stigma placed upon you and your bloodline, opening you up for a lifetime of exploitation and abuse. Zillith, born to the lower caste of her society, had a childhood filled with tragedy and loss. Orphaned after her parents were murdered, she barely escaped death herself at the hands of first casters. A survivor by nature, she managed to grow and thrive not despite her hardships, but because of them. All the while, the rage of her mistreatment burned inside of her. In the course of time, the fourth caste grew in numbers and staged a revolt against their oppressors. Zillith became a prominent warrior who worked her way into field command despite being rejected originally. During what is referred to as the Rout of Chief Ober, Zillith propelled herself into legend status by killing the prominent war chief herself in a stunning military upset. This caught the attention of Aeonian cleric and political strategist Vespes Zarbre. He saw her growing popularity amongst the masses as a means to an end and used his knowledge of Aeonian religious and spiritual teachings to bind Zillith to an ancient Aeonian prophecy that foretold of a lower caste warrior rising to become ruler, uniting the clans. This partnership proved to be very beneficial, and eventually Zillith rose to become the ruler of the Aeonian people. Zillith is a master strategist, hand-to-hand combatant, and spy. Extremely crafty and transactional, she will ally herself with an enemy if it's beneficial for her and discard them as soon as their contribution is no longer useful. And though she would easily outclass humans in terms of strength and durability, she doesn't technically have superpowers other than the natural speed and agility that is common amongst all Aeonians. But superpowers or not, the one thing you will learn from this saga is that the Queen of Aeons, Zillith, is no one to be trifled with or taken lightly, ever. Especially with Vespes Zarbre at her side. But I think we'll talk about him in another episode. We want to thank all of our patrons for their support. We simply could not do this without you, and I will see you.
Absolutely. So those are our 3 main characters that kind of start off the story.
Yeah.
We tried to put as much as we possibly could into the development of not only their backstories, but their family lineages and their cultural lineages. I think we developed...
You might say we got a little bit obsessive about it, but, you know.
How many years of history do we develop for each culture?
For the
The Entropics.
It goes back to about 1 million.
Well, I can count just within the first year, we probably did about 2,500 years of
Something
their history.
like that, yeah.
And we tried to mark every major event of their culture that would bring them to where they are. And we did that. We tried to do that for every culture and every player. There are other There are other characters and races we didn't include because it'd be too much and it'd be so operatic, it'd be confusing. But ultimately, we wanted to try to introduce the 3 major players that kind of kick off the story and the fulcrum point, so that when you start, if you start reading in issue 1 and so forth, you have a pretty good idea as to what's going on, who's who, and why they're doing what they're doing. So
they're our brain babies. And I'm really proud of the story that we're trying to bring to everybody. And, I was often, we get on Gray a little bit because when we develop a new part of the story, sometimes he wants to introduce it too fast. I'm like, this is a marathon.
I'm bad about that.
This is a marathon.
Put it in issue 2. We got like 70 things in issue 2.
Right. So I'm just happy about the fact that we got it up to the point we have it now. And we are actually many, many issues ahead. They just have not been released because there's still some more work to have to do with the art. But the reason we got so far ahead is because, as Gray said, I may have been reading comics since I was like 11, but it's different between consuming it and actually writing and producing it.
Yeah.
So when we first started writing, we just wrote. We said this will all be issue 1. Well, our third partner in Majestic Comics is Joseph Arnold. He has experience in the industry. He's been a part of quite a few projects. He looked at our script and was like,
this ain't one issue.
This is not one issue.
This ain't one issue.
So turns out it was like 5, 6 issues all in one, but we didn't know. And then I had to go back and think about the fact that, most comic book pages are like 24 pages.
If that.
And we had a lot.
I'm reading 8 Billion Genies, and that feels like it's only 15 pages. So, if you guys haven't checked out 8 Billion Genies, please do. Jesus. What a story.
He's been getting on me.
Oh, my goodness. Anyway, I don't want to get off track. So we do have one more piece of content we do want to show you guys. We talked about doing music from the perspective of the comic book characters.
Yeah.
And so we do have songs. We're going to only play one song, but afterwards, if you guys want to hear some other stuff, I'll be here with my little Bluetooth speaker, and we'll be able to hang out. I can show you some new music and stuff like that. But this song is called When Worlds Collide. It is a direct in-universe version of our characters, and one of the few times we actually get to rap from the perspective of our characters. I get to rap as Gray of Extropy, and he gets to rap as Lord Malik, Lord Entropy. So I think that's it's pretty interesting. Let me go back here for a second. I think that's what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
Bear with us. That's why we have everything set up. All right, should be up. Getting sound? No sound? Interesting. Oh, sorry, y'all. I'm the idiot. I'm the asshole on this one. Well, because I had muted it before, and it...
To represent entropy, and on the other side you have an...
All right, sorry.
It's real simple. On one side you have an ancient warrior race of beings that represent entropy, and on the other side you have an advanced race of beings that represent extropy. You know sooner or later these forces will collide. For thousands of years we suffered no peers, equals and rivals, none of them can survive around here. We bathed in the blood of enemies that threaten with malice, impale the heads of kings on spikes outside of their palace. Three entire civilizations, we made them extinct for trying to circumvent the balance. They were gone in the blink. A bona fide galaxy busted, a Reaper Armada. So any nation breaking the rules and we coming to stomp, yeah, we are legion. Manifestations of purest entropy, entropic empire, annihilating infinity. We are not deaf and know those rumors persist. We are the things that make it possible for death to exist. These lower species of specs that we're not bound to respect, we hardly notice them, even with our boots on their neck. The warrior class, we understand that the epitome, the masters of the massacre, loyal to Lord Entropy. Two empires of polar opposite sides, inevitability that a conflict arise. The deadliest armada determine who survives. When worlds collide, there are two empires of polar opposite sides. Inevitability that a conflict arise. The deadliest armada determine who survives. When worlds collide.
Type 2.7 in ascending. My race crosses light years like they're inches. It's quite weird. With our gear, we put fear in the abstract. Superior tech, only adhere to the math facts. Past that, we're masters of quadrivium. Exponential growth in the interim. Few can match that. Imperium for nearly a millennium. Peaceful race, but won't give in to anyone. No. The upper echelon who bonds with the lexicon. Experts in quintessence, assumptions of us are extra wrong. The ultimate expression of intelligence. If we can't learn from it, it's irrelevant. People of the measurement, mentor of the species that are lesser than. In a thinking war, we expect to win. We personify Extropy. Gray of Extropia will modify destiny without the fly weaponry.
Two empires of polar opposite sides. Inevitability that a conflict arise. The deadliest are marked to determine who survives. When worlds collide, when worlds collide. There are two empires of polar opposite sides. Inevitability that a conflict arise. The deadliest are marked to determine who survives. When worlds collide, when worlds collide.
That was off of my, thank you.
Much appreciated, much appreciated.
That was off of my 2016 album, The Sixth Extinction. Really proud of that song. Really proud of
Absolutely.
that song.
And anytime we get a chance to work together, it's like I feel like I can go into that Gray of Extropia mode and like be a weird alien from another universe and talk some crazy
Because
shit.
he's a weird human from
Yeah,
this universe.
from this universe, and I talk crazy shit. That's the last piece of content, but I do want to kind of go into just briefly kind of how to support if you're interested in supporting us, if you're interested in finding out more. We do have a website, majesticcomics.com. All of our social media links and everything are there. So if you guys want to follow us on any type of social media websites,
that would be dope.
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, we're all there. But also we have a shop there where we sell, our merch. We sell physical copies of the book. We sell, the basic pilot versions, but we also have an extended version where you get to see the inks, you get to see the creation of the characters.
And letters to the editor.
Yeah, we have a letters to the editor. He answers our letters to the editor, which is dope. Because I didn't really understand how important that was. He showed me this one where like this white supremacist wrote in like 1976 or something.
Stan Lee jumped in his ass.
Yeah, Stan Lee jumped in his ass about like, why it's necessary to have black characters in comics and stuff like that. So, I didn't realize the importance of that, but I'm glad he does. That's why he's chief editor of the company. And he's able to kind of cover my behind on that. But at the end of the day, I just want people to understand that we're trying to make content that is going to provoke thought in the same way we make music that tries to provoke thought. And if we can bring all of this stuff together for, different mediums for people to process us in, for instance, we're working on an audiobook version of this. We're working on a motion comic version of this. You guys actually saw some of it in some of the teaser where we actually have a good chunk of the issue 0 in a motion comic done. We just, we need more voice actors. So it's if you guys.
So
like I said,
again,
if you are into voice acting, let me know. But Tombstone, as we close this up, you got anything for him?
Yeah. So a few years ago on Father's Day, my extremely awesome wife, and by the way, when she comes here tomorrow, tell her I said that. She set it up that I could meet Stan Lee. And that was a pivotal moment for me because I've been a comic geek since 11. I was reading and loving comics before I started rapping, which is at 13. So we had already wrote a huge part of the lore, but we kind of backburnered it because we were still working on music, and it was always a different reason why we'll put it out then, or we'll put it out then. But after meeting him, it really kind of pushed me to do, because I want to do for kids and just other people in general as far as inspiration with Stan, with Jack Kirby, with Steve Ditko, with Dwayne McDuffie, what they did for me. When I was growing up, there was no shortage of people telling you what you couldn't do. And one thing about these comic books and the universes that they create, anything can happen. And it was a great escape. Now I know, getting all weird up here, coming to a comic book convention, talking about comic books, who does that?
Who does that? The audacity.
But that's kind of what I want to do with this IP, and I hope you guys, if you do decide to support it, enjoy it, follow the story, and tell us what you think.
If you guys want to check out a physical copy, I'm going to pass this out. This is the copy that I've been kind of, demoing to everybody. We've actually been on the streets talking to people, showing people, moving units. It's been pretty crazy when people get a chance to kind of understand that this isn't just the run-of-the-mill superhero punch-up sort of thing, and then you start getting their minds turning existentially, ontologically. It's like, wait a minute, what the hell are you talking about in here? Well, let me go in here and check it out. So you'll probably see us out there, moving and grooving, trying to,
You was doing that all day.
yeah, trying to ingratiate ourselves with people and trying to introduce our brand. But do you guys have any questions? We can open it up for any type of Q&A. If you guys have any questions about our characters, the creation of the company, our perspective is just black comic book company owners, right? You're more than welcome to ask. And you can just ask from there. You don't have to get up and do anything crazy.
But they don't handle the mic, no one will hear it.
No? Really? Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. Well, I guess you got to go up there then. Don't listen to me. Listen to the director. That's a motorized mic stand.
Wow.
I've never seen that before. That is dope.
That mic
I've never
stand-
seen that before.
That mic stand is like type 2.3 on the Carter
Yeah,
scale.
what is
Like
that? I thought it was going to sprout legs and start walking off and shit. Like, what?
He's one of the reasons for that payment to go through. You want him to use that.
Okay, that was fresh.
So I just wanted to say, I literally walked in here because there was something else I hadn't managed to get into, and,
wow.
I was just like, okay, well, I'm here. What else am I going to do in the Hilton? My God, what you guys have been talking about for the last hour is absolutely mind-blowing.
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
seriously. I mean, the whole, until you mentioned it, like the linkage between the music and comic books, you're like, well, why isn't there other people doing this? There's that sense of, we know that music connects with emotion, it gets into your soul, it really moves you, it really makes you think. You're talking about different parallels of life and the universe and the way that things link together, dualities, all those things, a lot of which we don't understand, but you're then bringing that into a comic book. So it's been I got to say, thanks guys, because this has been huge, and especially for me obviously, I'm plainly not from the US.
Right.
You've probably got that from the accent.
Hopefully we've treated you well while you've been
No,
here.
I'm doing well. You haven't managed to get rid of me yet. So,
Well, hopefully we can get you to move over here.
no, I'm done. I'm actually live up in Vancouver now.
Oh, wow.
So I'm over here. So this is, and to me, one of the things I love about DragonCon is that my background is my musical background is Slipknot and heavy metal and all that. That's kind of
like that?
that's my vibe. But I love it when there's sort of real energy and force behind the music, and when just listening to that last track that you had, that was getting the hairs going up and down the back of my neck.
Wow.
So that's that's moving you, and you're tapping into something. And I know that maybe I'm blowing smoke up your ass, as we say in the UK,
We'll take all of it.
but it just, to me, to be able to walk in, it's what I love about DragonCon. You come here. It didn't even register that you guys were doing anything. There was just something going on. You walk in, and all of a sudden, oh my God, there's a whole thing going on. You're trying to change something. You're trying to move something. You're talking. Especially in the way the world is right now, with so much of the connection with right-wing Christianity and all that sort of stuff going on, you've got to start making the stand.
Yeah.
You've got to start saying you are not going to dictate the terms of how we're going to live, how we're going to think, how we're going to behave, or any of that shit. And this is the stuff that pushes back, because we know. Everyone here probably knows it. You're going to stay. You can't argue about Jesus. They're going to everything you say. They're going to come back to you with some comment about Matthew this. There's a guy out there today, Matthew 12, blathering on about some crap, and you lot need to find Jesus. And
I tell people this all the time. The days of me being an atheist rapper, evangelical, where I'm going out and trying to deconvert people with my lyrics, those days are over.
Yep.
I understand. I
content.
understand. Most people, you're not going to change their mind in that way. That's not how you do it, right? Especially if they don't want to be like you. One of the things I feel like, and I'm going to get off into a slight tangent here, one of the things I feel like the secular community doesn't really understand is, if people don't want to be like you, they don't care what you think. They don't. They don't give a fuck.
They really don't.
Come on.
They really
So,
don't.
if you want people to care about what you think, try being somebody that they want to kind of be like, and then you'll start to see that they're far more open to your ideology. Because so many people out here have this arrogance about their intellect and this arrogance about their intelligence that frankly is unwarranted. I don't care if you're an atheist or not.
Yeah.
And that's repulsive.
There's a bunch of Dunning-Kruger stuff have all over the place from all different walks of life, and it's like my brother said, a lot of that is just not warranted. None of us know everything, and all of us can take a little bit of moment sometimes to just hear somebody else's point of view, even if we disagree with it, because sometimes we don't even know what we exactly disagree with because we don't know any of the background data or why the person came to that conclusion. So if you just listen to them, any flaws in their argument, they'll present themselves.
Absolutely.
Just listen to them.
Hey, can I thank you for your statement? I don't think we properly thank you, but thank you so much, man. Like,
Really
if a person
appreciate that.
can walk off the main path, off the beaten path, and stumble in here, not saying you stumbled in here, but, you know, you can find yourself
There's
in
a lot
here.
of drinking going on.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and actually, you know, we resonate with the message that we're trying to speak. Man, I hope afterwards we can talk to you some more and show you some more stuff, and
Absolutely.
you know, we would love to have you in our reader base.
I've already got the old Majestic Comics thing down.
Okay,
Oh, nice.
awesome,
Nice. Appreciate
much
you.
appreciated. Thank you, brother. How you doing?
I'm good. Well, the first thing is, I walked in there and the track, like with the mic, everything like this, I was like, you know what I mean? I was like, this shit is dope. Okay, but anyways, I kind of walked in here too because I was actually following a girl, but anyway, that's not the point. That's just the truth. But I walked in here and I was like, oh, it's Skeptrack. Let me go ahead and see what's going on. And then oh God, I forget his name. Anyway, he come in there, he goofy and stuff like that, and he was talking about, you know, y'all, they're the future, but you gotta be hard on them.
Oh,
You
yeah,
gotta be
yeah,
hard on
yeah,
them. They're the future.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
confident. Blah 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 blah. Okay. Anyways, so I was like, okay, well, let me check these brothers out and see what's going on, and then y'all really, I mean, you really blew me away, and with all the stuff, and I'm actually, well, you know, I have a 9 to 5, but I actually work with filmmaking and stuff like that. And all I was thinking about was, let me read all this stuff and see if we can put that to canvas. Like, I really want to work with you guys.
Wow.
Hell yeah,
I
let's
really
exchange
do.
info. I would
really
love
do.
that.
I
Yeah,
really do. I
and
really
especially if you see the vision that we see, and
Yeah.
it seems like you do,
Yeah.
that's 90% of it right there.
It is.
Some of the time, like early
It
on
is.
when we started doing this, is an interesting story because if we do end up working together, this will be interesting. We were working with a guy, our original letterer. If you look at our comic book issue, there's a unique aspect about how we letter our comics, right?
Okay.
We don't use black text on white background.
No.
I think that
Okay.
shit is terrible for the eyes, and
Right.
just we've learned through screens now that if you just invert that, it just looks even better.
Right.
So we decided to go with like colored text backgrounds with white text.
Oh, wow.
Simple change, right? We tried to tell our original letterer. I'm not going to put him on blast,
No,
but he
don't
knows
do
who
it.
he is,
Don't do it.
right? and we tried to tell him. Remember, we tried to
Yeah,
tell him, hey, we
yeah.
got this idea about we want to do every character has his own basic color background in his text, right? Just kind of a unique thing. And he was like, well, I don't know if the industry's gonna like that, and I don't know if I can work with you guys because that's so weird. And we were like, all right, man, well, I guess what? We can't work together no more.
Yeah.
And we fired him, we did it ourselves, and we're standing here right now. So with all due respect to him, I feel like we were on the right side of history with that.
Right.
Yeah.
But we
absolutely.
would love to exchange information with you, brother, because I mean, if we can make this thing something visual on camera, man, I mean,
Yeah.
that would be
Yeah.
a dream
That
come
would be
true.
dope.
Yeah.
So yeah, link up with us afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you. Questions? Any other questions? What's up, brother?
Hey, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Okay. Good to have you.
You mentioned in the track where you have both the characters rapping with each other that Gray from Exodia is from a civilization that's like 2.7.
Yeah.
Are you guys planning on having the characters deal with civilizations lower
Yes.
on the scale?
Absolutely. You'll see the contrast.
Yeah. Do you want to get into that? Because I do want to talk about that. So there is a problem. Okay, I'm a Trekkie. You guys know I came in here in the Star Trek uniform, right? There is a problem in general Trek philosophy, right? The Prime Directive is fundamentally flawed, in my opinion. Because if you really wanted to help people, it wouldn't really matter that they weren't technologically at your level. You would decide the amount of help that you could help them,
Right.
and you would cut off all the
Right.
dangerous technology, right? I'm a dumbass, and I can think about
Right.
that. But for what it's worth, the Prime Directive is what drives Star Trek. Well, in our particular perspective, we have more of an uplifting approach when it comes to how the Extropians deal with lower civilizations.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Entropics have much more of a standoffish relationship with them. I mean, before they were like that, but they're not.
They're not like.
By the time you meet them in the story, they're not like that.
Yeah, they
right.
Evolved a bit.
But every race, right, the Aeonians, with Zilith and her people, she deals with species that are lower on the Kardashev scale than in a different way than even Grey or Malik.
Right.
The Culex races, we haven't talked about them.
Right.
They deal with, because you have different levels on the Kardashev scale of civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
So we do cover that. We cover what it's like to be, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 on the cusp, and civilizations coming in and interjecting into that process,
right?
And whether that's something that should be done or is that morally ambiguous to do, yeah, we dive deep into that.
Yep.
It's a little spoiler.
For which issue?
0.
Go ahead.
All right. So you haven't read this yet, but at the end of the issue 0, the fulcrum part, our characters disappear. They go to a place. I'm not going to talk about this place, but let's just say this place is kind of what you're talking about.
Okay.
It is a place where the race is much lower on the Kardashev scale.
Type dumb. Right?
They are type dumb, but I would give them a little bit more credit because technologically they still have things that we find interesting.
Yeah, they have
but
things.
ultimately, yeah, we do deal with kind of the uplifting Prime Directive issue that the Star Treks of the world tried to deal with, and then we're trying to deal with.
And we also have a contrast because sure there are times where it works out, and then there are other times where it just complicates everything. It just largely depends on which civilization it is that reaches them, what philosophy of life they have, and how they interact with other species. Lord Entropy comes from a species that were very invasive. They had an empire, and they subjugated a whole bunch of people, and then they got their asses kicked by a force that was even greater than them.
Changes things.
That changes things. It changes the way they approach everybody. And even though they attempted to go back to those same shenanigans, when those enemies attacked again, they knew they needed help.
Grave Extropia.
So that's how they became friends.
One thing I will say is the influences of our characters, right? You talked about being lower on the Kardashev scale. I talked about in the intro video for Grave Extropia, there was a character we talked about, but we didn't have any profile for him.
Right.
His name was Notir Zagain. Now, Zagain is Grave Extropia's Carl Sagan.
Yes.
For me, Carl Sagan was such a pivotal person in my life and how he changed the way I thought about things, that I wanted to create that same type of awe for Grave Extropia. And so we created the character of a Notir Zagain, who has a completely different perspective on what you're talking about, how much you should interact with lower technological species, as opposed to the normal Extropian outlook as how they deal with these lower Kardashev
So much
races.
so that his civilization, they thought of him as a bit nuts. They knew he was a genius, but they looked at him like he was a bit crazy. A bit crazy.
Yeah.
That's how I look at him.
And then do you have any comics that we can pick up while we're here at Comics?
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Come see us afterwards and we'll hook you up. Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, we've been moving around selling a lot of these, so it's actually pretty cool that
This is our first time at Dragon Con. Not my first time at a comic book convention. You've been to a comic book convention, but it's the first time being somewhere where we're actually a comic book company.
Yeah.
Representing our own brand.
I get to wear the shirt. Like I get to wear the company
This has been
shirt.
like an amazing experience. When you walk throughout the halls and interact with the people here, well, the one thing that I find to be consistent is people are consistently kind to each other, helpful, and I don't typically see that in a lot of the other gatherings outside of the Comic-Con experience. And I kind of feel like if we had more of that outside of this space, stuff would be a little bit better, right? Because to be honest, when we was we just finished getting our badge. And as we were walking back to the hotel room, some guy, I think it was a security guy, he was trying to walk down the street and he somehow tripped and fell and cracked his head on the side of the...
Crazy ass story. Dude cracked his head. All right, so just quick story. We're walking down the street and we're talking, chopping it up. All of a sudden I hear, the sound of somebody falling, right? Like, but it sounded like he smacked his head.
The impact was...
If you would have turned around and not heard that, you would have thought somebody fired on him, right? Like, just knocked him out. And we turned around and he was, on his face. So we all kind of gathered around, and apparently there was a dude there who was like a combat medic at a certain point. He starts running like a concussion protocol on the dude.
Right.
So he's like, how many fingers am I holding up? He's doing the thing. And the guy was legit. He was tough. Guy stood up. Guy was like 6'5", like 220 pounds, like wide dude. And I'm thinking to myself, if he's any smaller, that dude goes out. I would not want to fight that dude. Yeah, I wouldn't want to fight that dude.
So he walked away with a little cut. I don't know if he was going to need stitches or anything, but I just like the way everybody rallied to help him instead of keeping on. I'm from Baltimore, and I'm here to tell you right now, all right? You fall and crack your head in Baltimore,
step over your ass.
You're going to wake up with your pockets inside out. And you're gonna end up with like 3 shoes, 2 on your feet and one in your ass.
Yep.
Like, so it was just good to see that, because we don't see that type of thing that often.
Any other questions? No? All right. Well, we appreciate you guys giving us your time. I'm sure there's a bunch of different parties and stuff you guys want to get to, so don't let us hold you up. If you guys want to come see us about any books or anything like that. We also have merch here if you guys are looking for shirts or hoodies or something like that to take back home. I would have to run upstairs and get some because we didn't really carry that stuff. But if you do want me to do that, I can totally do that. But yeah, that's the end of our presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.